Art, throughout all of human history, has been a medium to represent times of significance to us, giving future generations a small view into the past. Without cameras, people relied on artists to craft their legacy. Although not picture perfect, art in all mediums can give viewers a general idea of the who, the what, and the where. However, giving powerful people control over the visual aspect of historical events can bend the population in their favor, as art has the power to make people feel. If the feelings are real to the viewer, the more likely it is that they'll accept what they're seeing. They'll want to believe it more. And just like in the history books today, the writers can choose what details to include and exclude. Even the slightest change in detail from the actual event is enough context to change the whole mood and takeaway. An example of this can be seen with the event of Napoleon crossing the Alps in 1800, planning to launch a surprise attack on the Austrian army in Italy, leading to a great victory. The painting Napoleon Crossing the Alps by Jacques-Louis David and Bonaparte Crossing the Alps by Paul Delaroche show the same titular event but 50 years apart. And although they portray the same event, they have very different intentions behind them. And most importantly, they tell very different stories. One, a heroic depiction, pure spectacle, while the other, sobering and grounded in reality. This is how the intention behind art changes history. Jacques-Louis David, born in 1748, was a French neoclassical painter who often worked on war-related paintings. He made works based on logic and clarity, and many of his paintings reflected the social class of the one being depicted, which is important for the upcoming example. His primary medium is oil and has many famous projects that capture the realistic yet visually similar aspects from Greek and Roman art. He would eventually make art under Napoleon, describe it as imperial splendor. In fact, many artists were commissioned before to depict Napoleon, some of the first made to represent Napoleon's Russian campaign of 1812 for Russian emperors. David's painting of Napoleon crossing the Alps fits the description well. It was completed in 4 months, from October 1800 to January 1801. The work is visually expressive and shows complex knowledge of the human body, posing, and is full of glory for the military. The pose of a youthful Napoleon riding a white stallion, signaling to his troops with his hand as his bright red coat flows in the wind, paints a visually striking picture, portraying Napoleon as a flawless ruler fit for leading a military. Due to this flawless depiction, many see this painting as pure propaganda. David was seen as an art lackey of sorts, in quotes, aiming to depict his leader in the best light possible. This isn't far from the truth, actually. As events played out, France was recovering from post-revolution terror and instability. Then Napoleon staged a coup in 1799, became the first consul, and then held dominant power, later becoming emperor. In May 1800, he led troops across the Alps to fight the Austrians, leading to a victory in the Battle of Marengo in June 1800. To commemorate the overwhelming success, David's artwork was commissioned by King Charles IV of Spain to put the gallery of military leaders in the royal palace, in the royal palace in Madrid. Since it would be in such a place, the goal of the painting would be to paint Napoleon in the most heroic way possible for the public to see. By no means, however, was this accurate to what actually happened on Napoleon's journey. This piece by Jacques-Louis David is a great piece of propaganda, but the reality wasn't nearly as extravagant. In reality, Napoleon actually made the crossing in good weather. And while David modeled the dramatic rearing horse on a statue of Peter the Great, Napoleon had actually ridden a mule. He wasn't in his prime either, like the painting had depicted. In fact, Napoleon wasn't even the reference. It was his son. So this is Paul Delaroche. He was born in 1797, and he made Bonaparte Crossing the Alps in 1848, the other painting shown at the beginning. and it was realistically depicting what had transpired. The work shows a melancholic Napoleon riding on a mule in an unremarkable and realistic pose alongside his army. This was a stark contrast to the piece made almost 50 years prior. Separated by the time from Napoleon's rule, Bonaparte crossing the Alps is sobering to the viewer in almost every aspect when compared with the earlier piece by Jacques-Louis David. One detail that I find very interesting is how his army in David's painting is behind him, cementing Napoleon as the main focus with all the glory, but in Delaroche's depiction, he is depicted almost just as much as the soldiers, like he's just another person present on the journey. He's still the focus, don't get me wrong, but he's just as visually striking as everyone else, not as special as he was in the other painting by David. Viewers will likely see this painting after David's and see it as a correction to how things actually were. In the end, these two paintings show how much the intention behind the art can shape our perception of history. David's Napoleon crossing the Alps elevates Napoleon into a mythic hero, using drama, composition, and color to make the viewers feel admiration towards the emperor. Delaroche's Bonaparte crossing the Alps, however, painted decades later, strips away the spectacle to show a more human and realistic side of the same event. With these works together, they show us how art isn't really what happened, but what they wanted us to think happened. By comparing these works, it becomes clear that the stories that we see in painting can be as influential as the written history itself, and that perspective can change everything. Thanks for watching, and here are my sources. Thank you.